What will the lame ducks do? Illinois lawmakers are still looking at a big budget hole. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about goings-on in Springfield, sometimes Washington, and how it just might affect things on the home turf in central and western Illinois. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. Got a nice panel of Statehouse experts with me today. Mary Massingale is here from Illinois Statehouse News, formerly of, well, we used to work together when Copley was Copley. Hello, Mary, welcome back.
Hi, thanks, Bernie.
Charlie Wheeler, in the middle, Director of Public Affairs Reporting Program at University of Illinois at Springfield, longtime Chicago Sun-Times reporter at the Statehouse before that. Charlie, welcome back and thank you for bringing your knowledge.
Oh, you're welcome, whatever it's worth, right?
And Dave Dahl is here, who used to be on radio in Peoria years ago, but has been a Statehouse reporter for Illinois Radio Network now. For how many years, Dave?
Gosh, going on 4.
On 4 years. So you hear him on one of perhaps 55 stations across Illinois. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks, Bernie.
We are at an interesting time. It's kind of the winter lull. The legislature's out for a while. They're going to come back in January for just a few days before the inauguration of new state officers on January 10th. I think the legislature gets sworn in a couple days after that. We talk about the lame duck session. There are several legislators that aren't coming back and maybe can take an easier vote on difficult problems. Will we see that? Mary, let's have your thoughts on, might there be a tax increase? What's going to happen? How do we close what some estimate to be a $15 billion deficit?
There will eventually have to be a tax increase. We are just plugging along miserably here in Illinois. I know some people think a tax increase will come up in the lame duck session because redistricting is a hot issue this year, and they can trade votes to get redistricting and a tax increase through. Also, both the House and the Senate have formed Medicaid reform and workers' comp reform commissions, something the Republicans have always wanted and yelled at during their campaigns that we need. That could also be used as a bargaining chip for a tax increase. Whether you'll see it in the lame duck, I'm not so sure. Some say yes. Some, like me, I think it'll be later in the session when the whole budget is crafted together.
Just because everybody procrastinates year to
Yes.
year in Illinois?
Yes, yes.
As we have seen.
Those are my feelings.
Charlie, you're a little more, I don't know if you'd call it optimistic if you're talking about a tax increase, but.
Well, I agree with Mary. It's got to happen. I mean, it's inevitable. And I think if you were to speak with most legislators kind of off the record and get their opinion, they would concede that, yeah, we need more revenues. This is not the kind of problem that we can solve just by cutting. Effectively, the state already has cut billions and billions of dollars in spending, particularly for human services, for payments to certain medical providers. And it's done that by simply not paying the bills. Mm-hmm. So the obligations are there, but we just don't pay them. And so that's the equivalent of cutting. And I think we've already seen that there are reductions in services being offered to people who need them because the providers aren't being paid by the state, and they don't have the same luxury of not paying the people who give them the goods and services they need to actually take care of these folks.
Yeah.
And so there will be a tax increase. The reason I think it's possible before the old legislature leaves at, what would it be, at noon on January 12th, is because of those lame ducks. Once the new session comes in, by definition, there are no more, quote, lame ducks. They're all there in office. All the legislators in the House are going to face re-election should they choose to continue their careers in 2014. 1/3 of the state Senate will face that situation. No, I take it back.
It'll be more because of redistricting.
Right, because
the
of
entire
redistricting,
Senate will
the
be
entire
up.
Senate will
Right.
be up. So all 177 of them are going to be in the position of having to run in 2 years. And so then the question becomes, what is the line of least resistance in terms of getting a tax increase? So one of the ways is to use people who no longer have to be worried about whether or not voting for a tax increase might cause them problems at home. Although I would hasten to point out that in this most recent election, it was sort of a wash. Actually, the incumbent legislators who lost seeking their re-election tended to be people who voted against tax increases in 2009.
And of course we have...
Yeah, most of the people who voted for tax increases got reelected.
Yeah, and the
So
governor
there you
who
go.
said, I want a tax increase, got reelected too.
Got reelected
although-
narrowly, but he still got more votes than anybody else.
Yeah, Dave, any prognostication?
Well, I'm inclined to agree with Charlie and Mary. Over the years, you keep asking yourself, or at least I do, when are these guys going to take a tough vote? Are they going to take it now? And if they haven't to this point, what would make this any different? And I think now would be the lame duck session, would be the time to do it because of the folks that are leaving. They're never going to be farther away from another election than they are now. I'm not saying they will do it, but it would seem to make more sense than waiting until May when they'll have some other excuse to chicken out.
Yeah, the thing that has really blocked it in the last few years, even as bills have piled up, is that Republicans wouldn't come on to add votes to the package. And for example, Speaker Madigan in the House keeps saying, I'm not going to do this as a Democratic-only tax increase. By what I hear at the table here, redistricting might be the wedge. And Marion, you mentioned maybe changes in workers' compensation to lower costs to employers and unemployment insurance to lower costs to employers. Really, Republican issues might be used as a reason for some Republicans to jump on board in addition to the redistricting and self-preservation of these legislators.
And there's another advantage that would occur in the lame duck session, and that is that the mountain is halfway climbed in the sense that the Senate, back in 2009, in May of 2009, passed an income tax increase. The bill is sitting in the House, and so the senators have already done their job.
And that was
if
a
you
big
will.
one, right? That was a point and a half, like from, was it 3 to 4.5%?
It was 3 to 5, and from 4.8 to 5 for
businesses.
corporations, and it also expanded the sales tax base, taking in about 40 consumer services, which we don't impose a sales tax on, but all our neighboring states do. That would raise approximately $5 billion. And that would go to help pay our bills. It would put the state on a sounder financial footing based on just the revenue structure itself. And that bill has passed the Senate. It's languished in the House. And so, in a sense, the House is critical. And what you said about the standoff between the Republicans and the Democrats is correct. Madigan didn't want to hang his members out for voting for a Democratic-only tax increase, although the Senate vote was all Democrats, no Republicans. Tom Cross made the calculated political decision that he was not going to allow any Republicans to vote for it because he wanted to use it to hammer the Democrats in the election.
He, of course, the leader
So
of the
he
House
hammered,
Republicans.
and he didn't get where he wanted to be. He's still the minority leader. He's got a few more people, but he still doesn't have 60. And some of those people, downstate Republicans, are in a situation where voting to provide money to pay for the services that your folks need, to make sure that the jobs that your people have with state facilities are still there, that's not really that bad a vote, if you think about
Right.
it.
Well, in Springfield, that would certainly seem to be the case.
Sure.
Although the reps from the Springfield area haven't moved in that direction yet.
Well, they've suggested that.
They've said under certain conditions, if we cut enough first, and there
Yeah.
has to be a reason.
And by the way, a story reported this week by my colleague Melissa Hahn at Illinois Radio Network, the bills will be paid very, very soon up through the last fiscal year.
Yeah,
so
which-
they'll be caught up through
June
the end
30th.
of June,
Right.
thanks in part to the tobacco money.
Right, using money that, what do you call that? But that was tobacco settlement money that's supposed to be here long term, but we're using some of it now.
The FY11, though, would be another story, and we're about halfway through FY11.
Right, and they have to start catching up to those bills. The tax
We're
amnesty.
already like $5 billion behind in
Something like that.
FY11 bills.
Yeah. So
Because
if
we
you're
use
waiting
the
for money from the
FY11
state-
revenues to pay FY10 bills.
Still not great.
And the tax amnesty, Dan Long from the Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability said the state can count on perhaps $400 million from the tax amnesty program, an undetermined amount of which is money that the state probably would have gotten one way or another eventually anyway.
In a sense, the tax amnesty is like this tobacco settlement money. It's money that ultimately we would get, but we want the cash right this minute. So in the case of the amnesty, we told people, okay, we won't penalize you for the fact that by our accounting, you cheated on your taxes. You pay us up and we'll forget about it, no harm, no foul. And with the tobacco settlement money, this is money that we were going to get over a prolonged period of years, and in return for a bushel of upfront cash, we've given our rights, that money in the future, to the people who bought these bonds. So in a way, it's trading off. Both of them are trading off future revenues for immediate gratification, if you will.
Gee, that's odd in the Illinois budgeting world. I don't know if I misspoke before, but Medicaid is one of the things that these committees in the House and Senate are looking at, right? And where is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And any view on if significant savings can be achieved? I know Bill Brady in the campaign, Republicans in particular, have talked a lot about how we spend too much on Medicaid. We're giving it to people who we haven't vetted enough, so we don't know if it's going to the wrong folks. What might happen here, and will it be significant?
The Senate had its first Medicaid Commission work group the last week, November 29th. Immediately, the House followed with one on that Friday. I believe yesterday was the second one for the Senate. These are basically to gather information, but their goal is to cut the Medicaid program because naturally in 2014 we'll have an additional 700,000 people on the rolls because of the federal health care reform, and they will cost approximately $200 million each year. I think the Republicans have always gone after the All Kids program, which all of state Medicaid is called All Kids for the children. But it's the expanded All Kids, which is part of the program that is not Medicaid and that offers low insurance premiums to parents for any child in the state. I think the Republicans, from who I talked to, they would like to see at least the income levels for that program rolled back.
In other words, you can't be making $80,000 a year
Right,
and
exactly.
join this program.
And I think they want to tighten up on eligibility. Blagojevich, of course, expanded Medicaid beyond what it provides normally, and I think that they'll want to roll it back.
Yeah, will Pat Quinn go along with that? Because he, for example, free rides on transit for seniors, that was a Blagojevich trick basically to get the legislature to do it, and now Pat Quinn is for it, even though others say that $30 million a year in costs should not be borne by the transit agencies.
I did talk to Michael Gelder, who was at the first Senate Medicaid Commission reform meeting, who was with the governor's office and had been with Department on Aging, and he said that there had been no talks of pulling back All Kids. But if they need Republican votes, and this is something that Republicans have been shouting about forever, and we do need to save money to get ready for those new 700,000 enrollees in 2014, I can see something happening.
Okay, interesting. One of the other topics, certainly during the veto session, was gambling and expanded gambling and a casino for Chicago. And I know a couple of south suburbs are, I think it's Linwood and something next door to it, maybe Dalton.
They haven't picked the site, but
right,
they're
looking about
south
maybe
suburbs.
5 new casinos.
They're in the
One in
south.
Danville,
One in Danville.
one in a little town outside Waukegan I believe it's called Park City.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
One in Rockford.
Right, and the
Slot
governor.
machines at the racetracks.
Right.
Sound
And
familiar?
this is all when we're still supposed to be getting
And more
video
gaming
poker.
at the existing ones.
Exactly.
Yeah, plus at bars. I mean, for communities or counties that have not voted to ban such expansion in their own communities, our state building program is still based in part on getting
is
revenue
correct.
from gambling in bars
I think
that
they're
will be
hoping on
allowed.
like $300 million from legalizing what goes on anyway. And
So-
in a sense, it's the state wanting to take a cut of the mob's action.
How do you really feel,
Shocked.
Charlie? I guess the question is.
No, as a matter of fact, that's pretty much accurate. If you read between the lines and if you read the stories, there's a story about a mobster in Chicago who's under
Right.
accusations, including that he was the guy who was in charge of skimming the money from these for amusement only video poker machines.
Right. Yeah, and then was that the one where there was a bomb thrown in somebody else's
Yeah.
business because they were moving in on the territory?
Yeah, and see, the state won't do that. We won't throw bombs on these people, I don't think.
But we will tax it.
We'll tax it, right.
Okay. Well, the governor has said that the bill is top-heavy with all these new casinos, so it sounds like he's not going to go for it. Any thoughts about
the
this?
casinos don't even want to go for it because they say the market is oversaturated the way it is. And of course, they don't want the competition from a Chicago casino, and the November report from the gaming board just came out, and we continue to slide.
Yeah, I heard there was like a 6% less
Right,
revenue than a
exactly.
year ago.
So.
Well, yeah, and a couple of things. There was a move in the legislature by some to allow smoking again on riverboat
Yes.
casinos.
Smoking room,
But
like
that's
a
not
year
going anywhere either, right?
It could pop up again. I mean, it didn't. It's over in the. It's over
I
in
think the
one
full
of the
House
chamber.
has yet to
Yeah.
take a vote on it.
Right.
If I recall correctly, it was
Exactly.
put on the postponed consideration.
Certainly,
if
the
it's
American
okay.
Lung Association strongly opposed, saying that, that's not. The lack of smoking is not driving people to boats in other states, as the advocates of smoking say.
The knee-jerk reactions, the shorthand to describe where all this could go is always these gambling bills collapse under their own weight. There's too much that is added on, too many Christmas ornaments, if you will, and the tree collapses. Other states are more progressive than Illinois is about allowing smoking or positions or things of that nature. Dan Burke, the chair of the executive committee, where a lot of this has been in the House, said that you look at the Lumiere Place across from the Edward Jones Dome in St. Louis, and it's fabulous, and it's more fabulous and lavish than even the new Casino Queen on the east
And
side.
do they allow smoking there, do you know?
In St.
In
Louis,
St.
they
Louis,
do.
yeah.
In St. Louis, okay.
On the other hand, the kind of picking up on that, isn't there a new boat in Rock Island that's doing very well and hasn't had the drop-offs, in
It
part
is.
because it's a lot glitzier place
Yes.
than just some dumpy casino?
It's the only one that is doing better because they did refurbish it.
Yeah. And with respect to the smoking ban, I would point out the person who was one of the original driving forces against anti-smoking and instituting the statewide ban just so happens to be the guy who was the president of the Senate. So anything that might come out of the House saying, oh yes, we're going to carve out this exception, you can smoke in a casino, or the casino can have a specially, hermetically sealed room where people can go to
With
puff.
fans to the outside.
Yeah, I would guess that
Oh,
it
John
would have
Cullerton, right.
it would have an uncertain future at best in the Senate, because I don't see Senator Cullerton changing his stance on this,
Good point.
because he
only
was an anti-smoking crusader going way back.
And the guy who brought the seatbelt law in Illinois,
Yeah.
and keeps trying for helmets on motorcycles, but we haven't got that yet.
Safety first, I guess.
Yeah.
It started 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, in the Iowa side of the Quad Cities, and it was actually a river boat and, a banjo or whatever, and they'd actually take a cruise and there'd be a loss limit, and now all these states are trying to make it all one brick higher.
Yeah, well, that's been the process ever since we started with the scratch-off tickets for the lottery so many years ago, and the foot in the door actually worked in this case. So we'll see if we actually get more positions, casino positions than Las Vegas, but I don't think we're quite there yet. Speaking of smoke, medical marijuana was discussed again at the Statehouse. Montel Williams, a well-known TV personality, came by to argue that even though marijuana is illegal in his state, it should be used for people with ailments. I think he has MS, is that correct? And
He said he does have MS.
Was rather eloquent in his discussion. Obviously, there are people who think we don't want to make marijuana legal in any sense because it sends a message that this drug that has been illegal should be legal. And what does that tell the kids? So where are we? It appears to be going nowhere, correct, at this point
the
again?
moment, yes, although it could again come up again. But places like Colorado, these marijuana dispensaries, didn't we read about some tiny town that's got like 7 of these, and it's the biggest enterprise in the town in Colorado? But nonetheless, we caught up with
Is
Mr.
that the Rocky Mountain High stuff? No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that.
Oh, we caught up with Mr. Williams, and he said that he is a marijuana user for the medicinal purposes, and I assumed he lived in California. He said, oh, no, I live in New York. And I said, oh, is that one of the, I think it's 16 states or 15 that currently allow it? And he said, no, they're working on it in the legislature. And I said, well, how do you get your marijuana? And he said, that's my business.
And
So
so-
do you obtain it legally? And he said that he and Robert Morgenthau, who just recently retired as the district attorney there, like 90-year-old prosecutor, he and Mr. Morgenthau had an agreement that he would not be prosecuted. So whatever works.
We'll see what happens. Another kind of ongoing social issue since, hey, I think I saw in about 1977 when the death penalty was reinstated in Illinois, but we've had a 10-year moratorium on the death penalty in Illinois, and there is some question if that will ever be lifted or if it should be lifted. And obviously there are death penalty opponents who say it's just expensive, let's just put really bad people in prison for life, and then you get rid of all the expense and all the court battles. In addition to however small the chance becomes in the era of DNA testing of executing a person wrongly. But we've come awfully close in Illinois, and other states, it certainly appears that has happened. So any chance we're going to have a resolution of this issue either in the lame duck session before the new legislature comes in or this spring? Because Pat Quinn doesn't seem to want to move forward with executions either.
It was, I know the people who were pushing for the abolition of the death penalty were one vote short in the House, and that's why they didn't call it. I'm not for sure if we'll see it in the lame duck, possibly. I do know that Senate President Cullerton is personally against the death penalty, and it's odd how the supporters of abolishing the death penalty have framed it in a fiscal issue this time, saying it's very, very costly, and in these times we should get rid of it. And when it appears it should be like a moral issue.
It did get through a House committee, has not been called to debate in the floor, as Mary said. And it was interesting to note that during the veto session, they scheduled a hearing at 8:30 in the morning. And about halfway through the hearing, the chair of the committee said, we don't have very much more time to debate this, and you prosecutors, just pick a few of you to speak on this because we've got to get to the floor and have session in 20 minutes.
Huh.
And so people from all over the state had driven to be told that there wouldn't be time for them to speak on this issue. On the other hand, you could argue whose mind is not made up about it. But
yeah, and that's not all that uncommon in committees, is it? On hot topics, oftentimes, at least when I covered the legislature, oftentimes they would say, okay, you're the proponents, you got 40 people here, you pick 2. You're the opponents, you got 60 people, you pick 3, because we're not going to have
But
2
all
hours
is
to carry on.
for some reason on an issue that it could be argued, wanted to stifle meaningful debate on. It could be argued. Stuff it into a very short time window.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well,
And in a sense, there's sort of an illusion going on, this notion of a moratorium. All a moratorium is a fancy way for the governor to say, I will not approve executions. And as a practical matter, if I'm not mistaken, there are only 15 or 16 people currently on death row. Mm-hmm. The way the process works, when you're sentenced to death, it's automatically appealed to the Illinois Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court upholds that sentence, then you can go back through the circuit court and mount a collateral attack against the trial, the conviction, the sentence within the state courts. If you lose again at the Supreme Court level, then you go to the federal courts.
so it takes,
And it
like
takes
10
a
years,
while.
right?
Yeah, these
8 or 10
3
years.
around the lap. And I think I saw something, it was one of the officials, I believe, at the Attorney General's office was speculating that whoever gets elected as governor this time around won't even face the issue unless someone who is currently on death row says, okay, I don't want to appeal.
to
Go
anyone,
ahead,
right.
stick me.
Interesting.
The fellow who was convicted and put on death row, Randy Steidle, who was trotted out by the anti-death penalty people, said that the death penalty is actually the release, where the people being wheeled out are the happiest guys around because they know that their time in prison is over,
Yeah, well,
and that
that's
life
a
without
very-
parole is the real punishment.
Yeah, he was a wrongly convicted person.
Yeah,
That
he
was
was
a sad
innocent.
story. Yeah, and what did he do,
So he
17
would
or
have been
20 years
happy
in
had they
prison?
wheeled him in.
One issue that Governor Quinn has been handed is a pension reform bill for local, I think it's police and firefighters, so that future police and firefighters' pensions will kick in later in life. They'll have to be like age 55 instead of 50, I believe. And it's basically reducing future benefits. Mayor Daley in Chicago, who's still mayor until the election coming next spring, is adamantly against this, says it'll cause a big tax increase because they have to pay up the pension system, the hundreds of millions apparently that they still owe. Any idea if Quinn will go along with Daley or sign this bill, which people like Mayor Tim Davlin of Springfield, who's mayor for now until the spring elections, because he's not running for re-election either, have said is one of the biggest time bombs awaiting cities, these pension obligations, which are very generous to police and firefighters. Charlie?
Well, I think Daley's argument is that this is going to cause the largest property tax increase in city history. It'll cost $500 million in new property taxes, because what the legislation says is, unlike in the past when cities could kind of kiss this off, and some did, others didn't. There are some of the local police and fire funds that are fully funded, that have more than enough money to cover their obligation. Chicago is not among them. And so Daley says, this is going to cost the city too much, this is a bad idea, and what we ought to do is tell the employees that they have to pay more, because the amount that they're paying towards their pension isn't enough to cover the costs. And why should they get this kind of free ride? And it's the same kind of argument that's made on the state level, although, and I have a conflict of interest, I guess, because I'm in the state university retirement system, and should I ever decide to retire, I'd be entitled to a pension, I guess, assuming the money's still there. But I would note that since I started at UIS in 1993, every month my paycheck had money taken out of it that went into the state university retirement system. The state itself, as my employer, has not been as conscientious about putting in what it's supposed to, and neither have local governments. And I think what really sticks in Mayor Daley's craw and some other local officials is that this legislation contains kind of a, from their point of view, a draconian penalty. If they don't put in the money, the state will do it for them, and the state will take it out of local sales taxes, which the state collects.
So they'll get the money anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll see what the governor does. It's one of those dilemmas that's there. The other dilemma we have is we're out of time. So I appreciate the conversation. Mary Massingale, Charlie Wheeler, Dave Dahl, thanks for joining us. I'm Bernie Schoenburg, and thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time on Capitol View.